How to make chocolate. Why should you make chocolate? As if I needed to persuade you. Particularly dark chocolate has a good amount of magnesium in it, which many of us don't get enough of. Chocolate also creates happy hormones for you. And of course, there's a lot of science, maths, and technology involved in making chocolate. Plus, it's quite easy, only 3 ingredients. Okay, first things first, you need to assemble everything you need. If you've already got everything, skip to the time shown on the screen. For equipment, you'll need a small or medium-sized non-stick saucepan for melting, a spoon for mixing, and a mould. Silicone moulds are best, so if you've got a silicone ice cube mould, that's fine. These brown types are silicone chocolate moulds, and you can get them on eBay or Amazon. They are very flexible, they're kind of the best ones. You could also use a silicone cake tray, so like this muffin one I've got, I think I got it from Sainsbury's, and I'm just going to use the very bottom of it. You can even use silicone cake cases if that's all you've got. The silicone ice cube moulds are great. If you've got one that's less flexible, like this one, it's a bit more hard to get the chocolate out at the end. I would also recommend if you've got a silicone spatula, that's great for scraping. You will also need a UK cup measuring set, or a jug that has a cup mark on it, or a set of weighing scales, and you'll also need a tablespoon. Plus you'll need a sharp knife and a chopping board if you're going to chop up ingredients for fillings. There are only 3 ingredients in this chocolate. You'll need some cacao. So this is the chocolatey taste in chocolate. It comes from cacao powder. Cacao powder is less processed than cocoa powder, so it's more nutritious, but this recipe equally works fine with basic cocoa powder, the kind of cocoa powder that you'd use in a hot chocolate. In this video, I'm showing you how to make dark chocolate because I like it, because it's better for you. But if you want to make milk chocolate, you will also need milk powder as well. We want to pick a fat which will melt in your mouth but is solid enough for you to hold it. So the best one is cacao butter, so you can buy that on the internet, or you can use cocoa butter, which is a tiny bit more refined, or if you don't have that, you could use coconut oil, or you can even use normal butter. Cacao is quite bitter on its own, so the third part of the chocolate that we're making is something sweet. I use honey in this video, but you could also use maple syrup or coconut nectar or even icing sugar some people use. You can also use granulated sugar or like more gritty sugars, but you will taste that texture in the chocolate. If you make chocolate professionally, you would use a chocolate tempering machine to set it at an exact temperature which makes it snap easily and it looks nice and glossy. Because we're not using a chocolate tempering machine, you either want to make your chocolate layer quite thin or you want to add fillings so the chocolate doesn't get too dense. These are some pairings of fillings that you might like to try, so pause if you want to check them out. We will make the fillings first because it's the most time consuming. Here you can see I've basically got everything out of my cupboards to see what I put in this chocolate, so I recommend doing the same and only buy stuff if you need to. I decided on 6 fillings for my chocolates. If I were you, I'd probably do 2, maybe not 6. This is just to show you. It is quite fun to experiment. So number 1 is cacao nibs and peppermint essence. Cacao nibs are like pieces of cacao. They're crunchy and slightly bitter. You could also use mini chocolate chips instead if you wanted. The second one is raisins, walnuts and cherries, which is a bit Christmassy, I guess. So chop up everything into tiny pieces with a knife. And don't forget your clam grip with the knife so all your fingers are inside your hands. Number 3, I've got freeze-dried raspberries, raspberry flavouring and desiccated coconut. So I chopped up my dried raspberries into small bits so that when I put them on top, they'll be kind of more evenly sprinkled. This 4th one is in honour of my mum because she loves ginger. I'm using glacé ginger pieces, almond flavouring, flaked almonds and ground almonds. On the top, I'm going to use rose petals that come from this rose hip tea you can see in the background. I bought it on sale. It's not really my favourite, but it looks really pretty. You can also buy rose petals if you wanted to make a special batch of chocolate. Number 5 is dried cranberries and macadamia nuts. After making this might go better with white chocolate maybe, taste-wise. The 6th one is fruit muesli because it's just quite easy. Make sure that you've got a muesli which has got quite a few of the sugary fruit pieces in it because that makes it taste good. You can also add basically anything you would put on a cupcake on the top of a chocolate, like sprinkles or edible glitter. Now we're going to measure out the main ingredients. So get your cup measure out, open up the cacao butter, it smells so good, and measure out 1 cup of cacao butter. So that's about 125 grams if you're weighing it. That's in the bowl and it's ready. Put it to one side, so you could also use coconut oil or butter in place of the cacao butter. Measure out a packed cup of cacao or cocoa powder, or you can use weighing scales and you need 100 grams of cacao powder. You'll also need 2 tablespoons of honey, or you can use 1 if you want it to be much less sweet. Ready to start making it now. I've just laid out all the things that could be helpful. A soup ladle is handy for putting the chocolate in the mould. Spoons for dolloping. A spoon for mixing. Ideally not a wooden spoon, because wooden spoons can hold water that can affect the chocolate. Some spatulas for scraping, and your tablespoon for measuring out the honey. I've also got my non-stick pan, all my ingredients and the fillings are ready to go. If you don't have a non-stick pan, get a heat-proof bowl, put water in the bottom of the pan and gently boil it so the steam heats up the bowl, also called a double boiler or a bain-marie. Start melting the cacao butter in your saucepan. I've got it on a medium to high heat, and keep stirring to melt it. As soon as it's melted, turn the heat down to very little, so a low heat. Put in 2 tablespoons of honey. Make sure you scraped off all the honey from the spoon, and then mix it together really well. Now you need to turn off the heat, and if your hob stays hot, then you need to move the saucepan off your hob. Mine's fine. Okay, so put all your cacao powder in and then keep stirring it in until it looks smooth and glossy. It will take a little bit of time. Now we're going to start putting it in the moulds. For this one, I'm taking some chocolate out because I'm putting mint essence in it. I don't want the rest to taste like mint. So add about a teaspoon of peppermint and taste the chocolate on a spoon to check if you need more. Give it a good mix. To put in your fillings, you can either put them at the bottom of the tray and pour it around it, or you can put them on the top of the chocolate when it's cooled a tiny bit. So make sure you've got clean hands first. Smooth it off with a spatula, or you could use a knife. And then I'm scattering the cacao nibs on top now. For this next one, I am literally pouring it straight into a muffin pan, so it's about 5 millimeters of chocolate in each one, straight from the saucepan. Can be a bit messy, but you can try. So now sprinkle your flavourings on top, and then depending on what it is that you have used, you may need to push them down so they've got a good grip in the chocolate. So you don't want them to fall off. So in between, I made another batch of chocolate, and I'm going to put almond essence in this one. And I've got the almond flakes and ginger pieces already in the tray because I want them to go inside the chocolate. And then I'm saving the rose petals and the ground almonds for the top. I'm using my soup ladle here again to put the chocolate in because it's a bit neater. Fill it right up to the top and give it a scrape across the top for a smooth top. Now I'm adding the ground almonds and the rose petals. If you're using something light like rose petals, you may want to wait till the chocolate is a little bit set before putting it on top, otherwise they can sink under the surface. When you're finished creating your chocolates, you want to give them a gentle tap to get the air bubbles out and leave them to set on the side. Now these ones are fairly set, so they're going in the fridge for about 2 hours. Don't stack them on top of each other because they will obviously stick together. So it's now 2 hours later and I've got them back out of the fridge. This is the most satisfying part, which is popping them out of the mould. It's a little bit messy, so make sure you've washed your hands and make sure whatever you're popping them out onto, you can clear it up easily. Just turn the mould over and pop them out with your fingers. This is a walnut, raisin and cherry one. This is the peppermint one. This is the almond and ginger one. Do try not to put your fingerprints all over them because they have quite a smooth finish, and when you touch them you can kind of see. Oops. So the middle batch that I made, I didn't measure my ingredients and it had too much cacao powder in it. So now you can see that it doesn't look quite as nice. So this shows you the importance of measuring because ratios affect the final product. It's still going to taste okay, but it doesn't look very good. So I've popped them all out. So ta-da, this is what they look like all together, minus the failed ones. To store them, you can put them in an airtight plastic container in the fridge, or I'm going to give them to my husband, so I've put them on a tray which I've covered in a napkin, a layer of cling film, and then I put a layer of cling film over the top. Ideally don't use cling film because it's not very environmentally friendly. After taste testing, my husband says the raspberry ones and the ginger and rose petal ones are the best ones. So there you go. If you have a go, please let me know. I would love to see what you made. Enjoy!